Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Hi everyone. We're just waiting for Maria to join us. Hi everyone. Thank you for coming to our first Charla of the series as part of Experiments on Stone. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just waiting for Maria Veronica to join us. Hi everyone. Just a few seconds. Hopefully Maria will join us. Hi everyone. Good morning. Hello Maria. Good
Hey,
morning.
how
How are
are
you?
you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us for our first Charla of the series. So thank you everyone for being here, and especially to Maria. Um, Before I begin, I quickly to introduce myself. I'm Alana Hernandez. I'm the assistant curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego. We're here on the occasion of experimental shop. And I'm excited to be chatting with Maria Veronica today, and we'll talk a little bit about your work and your connections to some of the artists in the show. But before I begin, I want to take a moment to recognize that from my location here in Sherman Heights, San Diego, I am on the traditional territory of the Kumeyaay. Maria, let me read a quick bio and then we'll
Go
get
ahead.
into the images. So Maria has graciously joined us today, and it's Maria, her practice through prints, artist books, installations, sculpture, and performance. New York and Santiago-based María Verónica San Martín explores the impacts of history, memory, and trauma. Her work is in more than 50 collections, including the Walker Art Center, Minneapolis, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, and the Centre Pompidou in Paris. San Martin has been performing and lecturing her moving memorial series and Dignidad project since 2016, and is currently teaching at the New York Center for Book Arts. So just this brief bio, but then to I guess to explain to all of our viewers why we're here, as I said, we're taking this time to really delve into your practice in relationship to artists in experiments on stone. And so the exhibition looks at 4 artists, Annie Albers, Ruth Asawa, Gego, and Louise Nevelson, and their prints that they produce, their lithographs that they produce at the Tamarind Lithography Workshop. And so for me, I've seen so many natural affinities with Gego, who, as some might know, as this really prolific Latin American artist who is a big name for op and kinetic art in the Americas, and really was part of the most pivotal group of these artists in Venezuela, Gego, right? And Gego started her career as an architect. And as we get into your work, you also have very similar aims, I think, in coming into printmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Just super briefly, let me start sharing some images with you all of Gego's work, and then Maria and I guess we can talk a little bit about how you first came to. All right, this is a little awkward now, but there we go. You can kind of,
Okay.
but how you first got into printmaking, right? Because you said, like Gego, who is also interested in experimenting the line and the instability of the line. Gego was trained as an architect, like you were, correct?
Yeah, correct. So thanks for the invitation, Alana, first of all. Um, I was very excited waiting for the show to see it. So it's very interesting for me as a printmaker and interdisciplinary contemporary artist to see this, coming live during these times. I think I was trained also as an architect a little bit. I actually studied, but I was surrounded by an architecture family.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived, with this kind of light and open spaces and lines I grew up with the architect's world. Um, yeah, I think that Gego, we shared lots of processes within printmaking that has uh, a lot of analogies with the process of architecture.
Right.
Um, so it's pretty. Mhm. So both processes shares, a lot of time consuming. Let it dry, then go on to the press. Think on the press. Have a plan. Plan failed. Plan goes, or it's like at any certain point, and then take advantage, of course, of the mistakes, and then you get them into your work. So I felt super committed into both disciplines or medias or ways of constructing an idea, an abstract idea, of these crossing medias together.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point in terms of mistakes or how things happen as part of lithography. It's quite difficult to kind of come back from that. But I think what's so interesting, especially about this period in the 60s, was that it was all about experimentation. So this first print of Gego's is a 19. These are all of 1966 from the time her time there. But then she also created this experimental book, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a two-toned lithograph that is created, and then she put it together as a book form, which of course reminds me of your own work, right? Because you're interested, of course, in the printmaking process, but then the idea of a book. And I think
Mm-hmm.
when we think of prints, we often um, it's a kind of a two-tone process. And we think of one, how easily disseminated books are and prints, and how democratic the medium is. And I think also how experimental the medium is. And so I think you do something really interesting with your book project here for ideas of dissemination, but then certainly disseminating ideas that are really culturally important to Chile and to Latin America. So I wonder if you will bridge us into this first book from 2012 in their memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was one of my very first artist books. Actually, I created and printed while I was studying printmaking and book arts at the Corcoran School of Art and Design in Washington, D.C. And for me, at that certain point, it was super important to transfer and to communicate even to my class who I was, who I am. So then I was in that also a geopolitical, situation or a specific location. My interest was to talk about the memory or the not solved memory of my country, but at the same time to point out, the participation of the U.S. in all these South American dictatorships.
Mm-hmm.
So this artist book it works as an accordion, as a double accordion structure that also acts and is performed when I tell the story of the 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 disappeared that appears in this book. To the audience, it acts as a cartel or as a protest sign. So at the same time, it's a book of resistance that carries forward, the trauma of the families of the disappeared. That's the back part of the accordion book, which has printed with silk screen too the image of the government palace, which is called La Moneda. So that's why I have been also calling as an institutional critique, since it's like, as we would be again in front of the government palace demanding justice and truth.
Right. And you said, as you said, it kind of folds out as an accordion. And this folding also, I think, has resonance to your own training as an architect. Your father is an architect, but it's something that I think you kind of move through in your career, and it comes up in different iterations, right? Which I think is quite interesting. But even if we go back to just how dimensional this project can be, I think it is interesting to see the trajectory, and I think we'll get through that in this next
Mhm.
couple images. But I do want everyone to kind of be apprised to that idea of folding and unfolding. And this could also be in terms of the paper itself, but also I think through narratives, right? Narratives are constantly being unleashed. That's something that you're really interested in. So, um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think that these kind of narratives, when they're still, active in the contingency and in the present tense, once you open the book, it's like I start being like as a bridge from the historical facts to the audience. So the presence of myself or the librarian or the museum or wherever it is exhibit, and with a movement that is an act in itself of an action, kind of put this message forward and in the present tense. So that's why, yeah, this kind of foldings and unfolding structures coming from a very delicate surface and smooth as it is, the cotton paper that was previously, constructed wet, then was dried, then again wet. All kind of these subtle processes start being important, to share and to open and to just communicate in the present tense again. Yeah, to don't forget twice somehow.
Mm-hmm. So this folding unfolding kind of takes place in another book project that you have here, and I think we could better see how I think the narrative unfolds, right? Certainly through kind of an accordion way, but then how we read this kind of long format
Yeah.
book.
So then, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The last I mean the image before. So just to explain, that is a flag book that is constructed through a concertina accordion structure, and then it has several flags. So and then so that's why it's also printed from both sides. And then the next image, which is Memory and Landscape, Unveiling the Historic Truth of Chile. This artist book is a double accordion in itself. So both sides share the same dimensions, the same heights and width. But what I did for this one specifically was to print in two different qualities or characteristics of paper. So the wood blocks are printed on kitakata paper, which
Mhm.
is like a very thin paper, almost super similar to Gecko's one.
Yeah.
Um, and the other side, who are some portraits of the disappeared, with charcoal powder and silk screen. That paper is much more thick. So
Mhm.
then I had to collate these two and then pass it through the press. But yeah, again, this kind of folding and unfolding system, structure, or way of even thinking a narrative through an artist book, that for me is a book is not just something that you read in a conventional way from left to right with a codex or a spine. So my idea was to convey the idea of a memorial in itself that can be constructed within a two-dimensional book or structure that turns into a three-dimensional space or a memory site, inviting the audience to think and reflect on the historical accounts.
Yeah, I think your mention of memorials seems to be something that will come up in your more performative based work, right? So something. Well, this is another image of this what we just saw, which I think is nice to see. how it's laid out, right? And it's not always under a vitrine, and how it can be activated in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the site of a memorial or a movement, and I think that's so interesting about architecture and building in this way, that you're still kind of folding into things, and then
Yeah.
it becomes something from the two-dimensional to the three-dimensional, as you had mentioned, something that you're continually negotiating. And I think even if we
True.
think back to someone like Gecko, she's someone that often negotiated the two-dimensional to the three-dimensional, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
associate Gecko with these environment installations, right, of her Reticularia, which is the best known one, but she is interested in the relationship between the line and how the line transforms into different mediums, and in this case, her
Mm.
sculptures. And I think you're doing a quite similar thing.
Yeah, in that sense, it becomes interesting while you are printing alone or by yourself or realizing about the processes. It's like you see how the one deserve and needs the other one to then compel and being, this kind of marriage somehow. Or in the case of this work that you are showing, this is Dignidad, which is a sound and a visual performance installation too of a Nazi site that operates in Chile from 1961 to today somehow. It works as a torture center during the dictatorship, and when I decide to dig into the archives and the historical documents of what the center was and what is today, I realized as a printmaker at that time that all the abuses and the injustice and all this secretive enclave operating within this state, within another state, it was too much. Like it was like an octopus with several arms that you couldn't even find any kind of clue, or I mean, just the way the Nazis operated, that is like super, how they write all people, files that came into the colony and so on. So in that sense, I said as a printmaker, I cannot draw a line. It is too much. So then I came up with the idea to construct this kinetic metal sculpture that it is moved by the body and an audio of an oral archive that one of my collaborators and actually one of the ex-settlers of the colony found inside of the place.
Mm-hmm.
So it was this transcontinental conversations between Nazi agents from Chile to Peru and then to Germany in 1978. So I got access, luckily, to that unreleased tapes. And what I did was to do like a research-based project where I developed, or me with Winfried Hempel, who is the guy who found the German Chilean who found the tapes. We start declassifying or decodifying actually some of the words, the content, and then realizing how they, for example, start talking about a playground that meant the war Peru-Bolivia, or when they talk about pista de aterrizaje, they were talking about guns, or like across language in between guns and the kids' language or places. So what I did was to create this folding and unfolding big artist book, huge artist book, like this is like 60 kilos.
Right. Yeah, we could see the space of how large it is here. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are this is actually an exhibition at the National Archives in Chile that I had to increase the size of the sculpture in order to fill this kind of very huge space that was at my home country, and actually where the documentations and the truth somehow were on site. So So it was, yeah, it was a huge project, but my idea was to deconstruct symbols of power. So somehow the four performers, we deconstruct the swastika, the crucifix, and then we pass through the architectures of bunkers, tunnels, the bunkers, for example, in these when the four sculptors are flat on the floor, is like when they start looking into, you know, the past through the floor ground. So it was pretty important also to convey that idea, and then the sound of the sculptor was pretty not dramatic, but to capture the attention and the urgency of the case, since it is today is a private land that we cannot dig into the earth, the sun, where there's supposed to be 9 to 10 mass gravings right there. So it's like a whole, you know, I don't know, mistake, something that preserves, and it's just about the willingness of politicians and, you know, nowadays. So it was also, but becoming from my experience of the folding and unfolding, once I start working with this materiality, which was much more stronger than then. The hinges, for example, didn't exist 360 degrees hinges in the whole world. So then I had to work with 270 degrees, and then that meant to me that the sculptors, when you activate the sculptors, then they will have one side up and the other one down. So this is something that, as the performers, also has to pretty know well and have a good relationship already with the structure, which is a structure that can even damage you, but you have to know it. It's all of this kind of sense of power, control, system within the same act, and the relation in between the music, the immersive audio of these archives, and this folding and folding structure material.
Right. So this is the last image of this project, and I know as we kind of mentioned, or you mentioned, that it's activated, it's formed, and so we see this here in this act with these two performers. And I know that you're traveling this. So how many iterations of this project have you done?
So far, because this was a project I created in 2018, and I have had like 8 or 9 exhibitions and performance, and it always comes with a conversation or a talk, but it's been like already in 3 different continents. And what interesting for me the most is to show all the processes, my drawings, my etchings, because all this was developed through my process of investigation through the drawings, medium format photographs. So it's important. I always like kind of install like a wall directly with my notebooks and drawings, along with the performance that then after it ends, start turning into a sculpture. But yeah, so far like 9, and the last one was at the Immigrant Artist Biennial in New York. That's supposed to be presential, and we ended up performing all 9. So it was pretty different and challenging in every sense.
Totally. I mean, it's in this post-COVID universe, we are in this, excuse me, everything is online, is quite digital, and so I'm glad that the project could live on in that way. But I will just go back to say that I don't think we've said this explicitly, but your work is political in looking at political abstraction, right? This is something that you're interested in, and I think that idea of your political prints and how this has kind of engaged into a performance research project is really interesting, and it's something that you're continuing on past this project, and something that you're working on in your newer projects. Is that correct?
Mhm. Yeah, that's correct. I start mixing and shifting or taking advantage of more medias and integrated them into a whole narrative or language somehow. Yeah, and now I'm working on a project that is called the Javelin Project. The what's the name? The Javelin Project, the intention of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, during the pandemic in New York and inside of the apartments, then I start printing. I start using my body and bamboo barren to press into huge prints because just of the need to express myself. And then I start, doing like a lot of, I don't know, like freedom, expressive images. And I just had to work with the 3 inks colors that I had at that time. So then, but I just needed, like, instead of soaking the paper in a printmaking studio, I use my tub, my bathroom, and towels to dry but it was the real need. But then I start like dreaming and reimagining. I was an athlete in the 90s here when I was at school in Santiago in Chile. So then I started dreaming with the action that I did when I threw the javelin as a professional athlete in the national stadium where people here were tortured and so on. So then I started feeling that image and I start representing that idea on my creation or mind. So then I order, like, a javelin through Amazon, and then I went to the park to throw the javelin like 20 or 30 years after I was a professional athlete. And now I'm working in this performance that has to do with a ritual performance and migration, and that explores the concept of resistance and freedom through the history of an ancestral spears, as you can see it here, to the professional javelin. So what my intention is to how would that feel, the feeling of throwing this apparatus that has to do also with, always when you are throwing, you have the control of the object and with yourself, but you don't know where the javelin will end up. And all this kind of trip, which is like a semicircle, for me, start making the reflection of how myself as an immigrant woman from South America now, it's like kind of like when you are transferring these goals or limits and borders. So somehow, and it's also like a tool that, of course, it looks like a harmful tool, but it was also made and meant for ancestrals and indigenous to get their food and to survive. So it is an element that I feel it has like a lot of negotiation again with myself, the musician who will work also in this performance, and with a choreographer that I'm also working on. Those are some prints, etchings that I start doing on hankies on top. So how these thing that is also like super phallic or is like a patriarchy also a statement, how these elements start being or combine the subtleness of the woman who wants to, get into another land, or who wants to get a better, professional, or who wants to get into, it's like a call for the no borders and a patriarchy conceptual
Mm-hmm.
idea, but also through sound composition that we are recording, the sound of this kind of stone with the wood, and then the sound of the wood in itself with your hand, like exacerbating these sounds in contradiction of how these javelins are still part of this or still fit in the capitalism world we inhabit somehow. So it's
Right.
I got like a lot of anecdotes, and one that is important for me to tell and share is like the men's javelins had to change the center part going to the back because a professional athletics field has 100 meters. So then the body and the men start having each year, each time, much more strength. And then at a certain point, the javelin didn't fit in the field. So the organization had to move the center more to the back in order to have more weight into the beginning or the point of the javelin in order to still fit in the field. So this is how we accommodate, somehow
Right.
to the system we are living. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and I think all of this project and the previous projects that we spoke about, all kind of the underscoring theme, I think, are systems of power that you're interested in underscoring the systems of power that we live with, and you're kind of negotiating them and disseminating them in this way.
Mhm.
So I think this is really interesting, and I think we all look forward to seeing how this moves forward and progresses. I'm really excited to see the other prints that are included, and of course how an installation and this in real life would look.
Yeah, I certainly will show you how this will develop. But the interesting thing also is like when you work with so many medias, then you need at the same time all the medias active in the same time to work with all together and not with one more than the other one. So this kind of crossing experience and languages has to be for me at the same time. So everything occurs at the same time to create the final work.
Well, thank you so much for telling us about these projects. Hopefully, our viewers, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function below. It's the one with the little question mark. And if not, we'll wait a couple minutes to see if anyone does. But
Mhm.
I'm super pleased to see all of your work, and for you to tell us more about these incredible projects. I think especially your book project, I think something that I'm incredibly interested in, and I touched on earlier, is the idea of print as being democratic, but then certainly the dissemination of books, right? And so I know that your book project, you are particular in making sure they go into libraries, right? So that people can touch your books, that they can use them in that way. And I think that is really interesting and an interesting way of how we think of artist books. So I wonder if you want to chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So once I start creating more and more books, I I was able to put them all in a series that is called Moving Memorials that for me start making a lot of sense. Also in the way of dissemination, these or disseminate these different objects. For me, it was something like an artwork that is easy to carry, to bring, to travel with, and but then expand and occupy like much more space once it is activated through a vitrine or through the librarian or through a public library. So then this series of artist books that are I think 8 titles. It's like Make the Economy Scream, In Their Memory, In Dignity and Resistance, Memory and Landscape, and The Right to Know. They all belong to this series, but what it makes for me a lot of sense was to show them all together once I have invitations to museums or universities, but on the floor. So this is when I use the floor, and I ask, can I use the floor? Because I really like the act and the gesture, like that one, of the people to bury it, a body that was not still found. So like for me, it's important that this kind of super fine printing, unique, I mean, those are not unique, but super delicate somehow, touch and encounter, this, the nature, which is where they belong, somehow. And also, yeah, this is at Art Omai in Ghent. It was, I think, my first performance that I activate those books right there. So in the one that I am inside, we didn't show it. No, in that slide. This is Villa Grimaldi. So this was one of the most symbolic and emblematic theater center that operates here. And my idea was to print and to work with this duality of how the beautiness of the Andes mountain that surround the center didn't know or wasn't aware of what was happening inside. And then in the inside, there is a very much more longer accordion structure and bigger, of these ghostly drawings, etchings actually, of that I got from testimonies and oral archives from that site and interviews of how torture happened, different kind of realities that didn't have to do at all with the beautiness and the unconscious life that was outside of the center. So somehow when I design, I'm a graphic designer. I studied a little bit of architecture, and then I ended up being an artist. So I try to think, that's why architecture is super important in my practice, because you cover everything. Like I can't print or think in an artist book by having one blank space, unless it is like, as Gego do, like this white lines on top of white paper. So this is a subtle and intentional decision. But for me, books disseminates history. Those are real archives that save history, records the life, and it's an archive in itself. It's like very, very, it's like a gold somehow. So if I decide to create something, I really want to communicate, and then to try to do a little bit of activism, that activist cannot always be like on the streets with a huge, movement, but also when a student, or when a researcher, or someone who is like, doing something at the Library of Congress, or at the New York Public Library, or even at many, many schools and universities, they wanted to have this intimacy or intimate relation with the book. That's also an activism that is like one-to-one and in silence. So I kind of try to transfer and go not beyond, but trying to get all these alternatives or choices, or somehow to manipulate these two-dimensional works, but that also, when you open, then you still smell a little bit of the ink that was printed 5 years ago, and this is like, oh, this is live, and we're talking about live. So yeah, for me, this whole process that has a plan, and again, that plan can fail or can progress or can go into, the target, or the your final destination. But it's what I like a lot about printmaking is like, when you have a plan and then you print it and pass it through the press, the print or the image is, for me, always better than I imagined before. So it's like, oh, cool, or okay, like it. And then that's like a gift, or it's like an award for all the slow processes we are talking about, hand, like from the computer to the hand, like in reverse. And when the print gives you like a good response about all the work you have done before, is like a good communication. Is you start having empathy, with that um process and waiting time. It's a lot about wait, and then yeah,
Mm-hmm.
plans and simultaneous working steps, dirty, clean.
Right. No, I think that's a really poetic way to think about printmaking and the process of making prints, and something a lot about as someone that has not been a printmaker but knows how arduous it is, and how, especially in Gego's case, how collaborative it is, and how the result might change, right? And
Mm-hmm.
different states and different things, and how all of that kind of trial and error is a big part of printmaking. And I think, thank you
Mm-hmm.
for reminding, I think, all of us about the process that it takes, right? There are different iterations, there are different types of printmaking, and lithography at the Tamarind is just one, right? And that you work in your projects that you showed us today, that you've worked in woodblock, in etching, and it's just so nice to hear your process about all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I'm also like super interested within the process of, or how printmaking works. Is like this, the battle or the resistance between the oil and water-based inks and process. So that's also something that is a continuing struggle, as a message or as a reminder for the one who is printing, somehow. And lithography is by far the most difficult technique for me, in the printmaking world. So it was when I was drawing a portrait on a litho stone. It was then with the etching process when the portrait disappeared
Mm-hmm.
and then reappears printed on the paper. So for me, it was an act of living or reliving by myself in decades after what happening with the issue of disappearance. So how the technique of printmaking start acting as an aesthetic, as a tool to show, to convey the idea of disappearance, and representation. So yeah, lithography was like when I really felt that the technique was accompanying me with the content and topic I was working on. Yeah, I love tamarind, by the way.
So that's a really fascinating, I think, way to end, is just even thinking about disappearance in terms of your own work, about something that continues to plague so many artists in Latin America, um, with the desaparecidos, and
Mm-hmm.
how it really informs so much of your work, but certainly of others that we think about in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
This was incredible. Thank you, Maria, so much for your time. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to DM the MCASD account, and we can kind of move from there. Please, a couple of housekeeping things. Please see the exhibition, mcsd.digital/experiments on stone. Please follow Maria on Instagram to keep up with her projects. And of course, if you're new to us, please follow us on Instagram, see what other things that we're up to as a museum. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and for watching today.
Thanks, Alana.
Maria, have a good one.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.